The story begins in a hospital room, where our main character, Takuto, dies while playing his favorite game Eternal Night. Then suddenly, he wakes up in a strange new world completely alive and well. There, a beautiful woman with red eyes named Atu greets him. She was a character from Eternal Night, a strategy game Takuto loved. And Atu calls Takuto her beloved king because he was the only one who finished the game on the highest difficulty, using the ruined civilization which was the hardest to manage. And because of this, Takuto was at the top of the global rankings. Atu remembers everything, including when he played and what he said to her, so in simple terms, Takuto's favorite game character became real. He felt very emotional seeing her, and both Takuto and Atu were brought to this new place. Atu believes it is the world of Eternal Night. So she wants to start over and conquer this world with Takuto just like they did in the game. She says it does not matter if it is Eternal Night or a different world. They can rule it and create their dream kingdom if they are together. Takuto was confused but also amazed by her words, so he decided to join her to bring back their ruined civilization. Atu then got into her evil character and said some classic villain lines, and Takuto played along. They wanted to recreate their civilization, which was known as the most evil nation, and to do this, Takuto used instant production to create a little monster scout. It was disgusting, but since their nation is about evil and ruin, Takuto wanted to stay hidden and gather as much information as possible. He gave the scout its first order, and Atu warned it to do a good job. It seemed her command still works, and Takuto could also use his MP for production, but emergency production uses too much MP, so they need to avoid it, and Atu wanted to fight to get more mana. But she is weak, and exploring is too risky right now. Meanwhile, the scout was moving ahead and Takuto was watching its location with a shared vision, which helped him understand the surrounding area. Strangely, the scout did not run into any monsters or animals for a while, and Atu thought monsters might be hiding, but no animals was odd. If there are no animals, then they will not have food. So, Takuto decided to scout a little more, and Atu felt sad because she was not being helpful, but Takuto was just happy to have her there, which made her happy. But then Takuto saw a small dark elf settlement. It looked like the poor people had barely escaped from something dangerous, and Atu thought this was normal. Dark elves usually try to stay neutral but are considered evil, but them being so close was bad news for Takuto because he wanted to keep his civilization hidden. So Atu suggested they run away together, and Takuto agreed with her, but Takuto quickly changed his mind and chose to observe the dark elves first and see what happens, because maybe they would get lucky and not have to flee. However, the dark elves came to them first. A while back, before Takuto was summoned, the dark elves were looking for a settlement but found no suitable place. The forest had plants, so they stopped for a while so their elder and children could survive. The head warrior of the dark elves, Gia, decided to lead a group to find food, and according to old books, Emil had read that a cursed forest lay ahead where something evil was sealed, but Gia thought these were just made-up stories because the forest looked normal. He continued the expedition, and soon he too thought this forest looked dangerous, but they had no other choice but to find food for their people. That is how they ended up here, and just from the aura of Takuto and Atu, Gia knew he was in trouble. Especially Takuto was giving off death vibes, so Gia and the others immediately knelt and announced they were from the Masarum clan and apologized for entering the High Being's domain without permission. Atu was pleased they had manners and understood the situation. Gia then told them they lived in a land called Idaragia, but he was going into too much detail, which annoyed Atu. So Gia got straight to the point that his people were being targeted and driven out of their land. He felt like he had made his last mistake, but Takuto told him to continue. Then Gia said the mass killing was insane and they were left with almost nothing, so they came here to escape, and after settling, the young dark elves decided to explore and gather food because they had not eaten for days. These poor dark elves were innocent people and were killed brutally. Anger filled Gia, but Takuto gave him some apples. Apples were not from this world, so Gia was wary, but he could not say anything. But his group, however, immediately started eating them. Gia was not eating, and Atu noticed he was being rude to Takuto, but Gia was thinking about the kids back at his settlement who had not eaten anything yet. He wanted to give them food before his own hunger. This was a noble thought, so Takuto then made a mountain of food for them. Dark elves are scorned as beings of darkness, yet they survived only thanks to an elf's mercy. No one had ever helped their kind before, but Takuto did. Plus he gave them a lot of food using emergency summon. And other dark elves were hoping Gia would bring back food, and many lives were barely clinging to that small hope, and today was their lucky day as Gia really brought enough food for every mouth. Watching those pure smiles was worth it, and a girl asked where he found the food, but Gia kept his encounter a secret from others. After everyone fell asleep, the elder of their group came out. He praised Gia for bringing back food, and Gia said he tested the food before handing it out. The food was incredibly good, so he told the elder about his encounter with the legendary being earlier. Emil had said an evil being was sealed in the woods, and the elder realized it was the King of Ruin mentioned in ancient books. Legends say the King of Ruin will appear to bring destruction and create the world anew. Gia did not ask for his name, but he was sure this being was dangerous beyond their understanding. Still, a girl was serving him and was interpreting the king's words to them. The elder could tell that even if this being was not the King of Ruin, it was certainly no good. So he asked Gia if he had offered the being something. So far Gia had not, but evil beings never do charity like this, so why would the King of Ruin help them? Gia said his grace just showed sympathy to them, but the elder got angry at him for showing respect to an evil being. But evil or not, Gia said he only knew one thing. His grace helped them when they were dying from hunger, so he did not care who or what it was, even now. Their strength to argue was all thanks to him, and Elder Molter could not say anything further and understood Gia was right, but from now on he wanted to negotiate with the king, and at that time, the King of Ruin was being lectured because he used their precious mana for those dark elves. Takuto could not help but feel sorry for them, but Atu got mad. Takuto tried to convince her and offered to do anything she liked because he needed her. That completely changed her mood, and she started praising Takuto again. Then Takuto said he is too shy to talk. Even in front of dark elves he got shy, and the reason is that he was a complete shut-in and did not even talk to nurses or doctors. Poor guy. Then that disgusting scout creature scared Atu a lot. That's why Elder Molter was being cautious, because no evil being would give food without expecting something in return. However, he also understood that without the power of a king their people wouldn't survive much longer. They were already on the brink of starvation, and constantly on the move in search of a place to settle down. Takuto overheard their conversation, so he told this to Atu that the dark elves were returning. And she simply wishes they take the food they couldn't carry back and leave. Takuto too thought it would be for the best. But since he's terrible at communication, Atu stepped up to handle the negotiation. As always, she was more than happy to help. So when Elder Molter and Gia arrived, the elder began by offering his gratitude. Then he wanted to know the name of their savior, and after getting Takuto's permission, Atu revealed their names. Introducing Takuto as the King of Ruin and herself as Atu. Still, she also made it clear that it is time for them to leave, and Molter expressed his desire to repay their kindness, but they had nothing of value to offer, not even food. So Takuto thought of something else, and his idea actually made Atu angry. Instead of following his suggestion, she imagined their heads hanged on stakes is better, but Takuto knew dark elves wanted to repay the favor. Plus it would clear the doubts that they gave it for free. Atu understood and told them that Takuto wanted something from them. This immediately relieved their anxiety, and then Atu explained that Takuto wished to learn about the world outside. Elder Molter happily agreed to share all his knowledge. But once that was done, Atu told them to leave the forest. If they refuse, only death would await them. Molter didn't argue and accepted, but Takuto realized that if they don't die here they might somewhere else. So he stopped Molter and instead asked them to become his citizens. He had a refugee system which allows him to take them in, and since the dark elves were considered neutral race, making them his citizens will help. Atu still had her concerns, but Takuto reminded her that their usual citizens were homunculi, who weren't exactly good for health to look at. That's a convincing point, so Atu agreed. Molter then asked what would happen if they agree, and Atu said that they would never have to worry about anything for the rest of their lives. Which was honestly a strange way to put it. After accepting the offer, Takuto made his way to the elf settlement to make things official. Upon his arrival, all the dark elves knelt before him, and one guy even fainted from the overwhelming aura Takuto gave off. Atu then announced that from this point on they are citizens under King Takuto. All the conditions had been met, and with that, Takuto confirmed it by pressing OK. However, Gia felt nothing at first. But then suddenly he was consumed by an intense hatred. This is what Atu had mentioned earlier, that becoming Takuto's citizen meant becoming evil, and the first sign of evil was hate. Takuto then asked Gia if he was alright, and that simple concern from him touched everyone's hearts. This marked the official founding of the Kingdom of Manogra. Then afterward, Takuto bought a map from Elder Molter. But once he saw it he started to throw tantrum like a kid. because the place they were in is the worst starting location, as there are two massive kingdoms nearby, one worships the holy god Arlos and the other worships nature. And if either of them discovers their evil kingdom rising, they would surely form an alliance and launch an attack. That was a dangerous situation, especially considering that their usual homunculi citizens weren't very bright, though now that they had the dark elves, so they might be able to make up for that weakness. There heard that dark elves were coming, and this time they brought Emil. She was sharp and knew a lot about legends in different nations, so her knowledge would be a great asset. Atu already had future plans in mind. So first she appointed Elder Molter as the head of state affairs for Manogra. Since he could use magic and had wisdom for 2 centuries, he'd manage everything efficiently. Then Gia was given the role of head warrior, and he was happy and ready to kill anyone, which made Takuto a bit uncomfortable as he preferred peace. That attitude made Elder Molter happy because he will be more useful than Gia. Atu noticed that the dark elves were really hard-working, so Takuto decided to let them improve the area first. Specifically, he asked them to build houses while cutting down as few trees as possible. Molter said that elves loves nature, so it's easy for them, but Takuto also told them to do reforestation as well. That was completely new to them, and both he and Atu realized that this world's magic technology is underdeveloped. But that also works to their advantage because it will give them an upper hand over other nations. Then Atu explained that reforestation meant planting new trees where they harvested lumber, but since trees take a long time to grow, Takuto wanted them to use magic to accelerate that process with magic. Atu made it sound like Takuto had invented this idea and gifted it to them. Emil even believed that the apples they ate earlier were Takuto's creation. Atu was boldly telling white lies, and Emil had already planted seeds to grow more apples. So this reminded Takuto that the fruits were actually from another world produced with his emergency production skill. So that means he could also produce other things too, although the more complex an item the more mana it would consume, but even so, it meant Takuto can create guns and artillery and could eventually become unstoppable in this world. But far away in the human kingdom, someone from church sensed that something is happening deep within the dark continent, and that would soon change their world forever. And right there our episode 2 ends for today, so stay tuned to watch the next episode, and for that subscribe the channel and hit the bell icon to get the latest updates. Till then, take care. Alright folks, so last time we saw our King of Ruin wished to kick out the Dark Elf refugees from the Dark Forest for safety reasons, but since the elves were already driven from their own land and had nowhere else to go, Takuto felt bad and decided to take them in as his own citizens. Now, becoming his citizens meant turning into evil beings, and since the Dark Elves had no better option, they accepted the offer. With it, everything was going on track. They had gained a vast piece of land and beautiful citizens to begin building an evil civilization, except, there was one little problem. The land they claimed sat dangerously close to 2 great kingdoms. The kingdom of elves and humans, both of which were strong followers of God and nature, and if they finds out an evil kingdom had risen nearby, they would likely unite to wipe it out. And unfortunately, the saint from the human kingdom sensed an unusual disturbance in the dark forest, but for now, she was heading somewhere with a squadron of knights. Some of those knights believed the saint's overwhelming power is just exaggerated rumors, but that illusion vanished the moment a horde of monsters appeared and the saint took it out herself. One inferno spell was all it took, proving that she was more of a weapon than a holy woman. Then after the fire died out, the land once again turned fertile. Saint is one of the reasons the human kingdom was able to maintain such strong ties with the elven kingdom. There are 7 saints in total, but right now, this one had instructed the cardinal to send paladins to investigate the dark continent. However, the cardinal refused. So the saint said she would go herself, leaving the cardinal with no choice but to manage and comply. Deep down he hated the saint because she came from the countryside, and painfully the saint was aware of that. Yet her pure heart only wanted to protect the people. Then back in the dark forest, Atu was cheering for the dark elves to work diligently. They had already completed a residence for Takuto and were prepared to build homes and other necessities. And to keep things in order and move faster, they decided to hold their first council meeting. But before that, Emil brought a new outfit for Takuto. He loved it so much that he forgot there was a meeting waiting for him. Then Elder Molter started the agenda. First, they had to prioritize what to build. People were already out gathering lumber, and Atu suggested that they should start with a food production facility. Molter thought Takuto could just summon it, but Atu didn't want to bother their king with something that minor. Besides, Once their land expands, distribution problem would arise. That's why Atu introduced the flesh tree. This tree produces meat that tastes like human flesh, which sounded evil enough that Molter said many people will reject the idea of eating it. Still, Atu and Takuto insisted they should try planting it first and judge it later. After that came the food storage, which Emil took responsibility for. Then they moved to discuss national development. The elder asked which technology they should prioritize on developing, and Atu excitedly recommended magical tech. Atu wanted the elves to begin researching military magic. Usually a normal mage like Elder Molter could handle a group of knights, but Atu's vision was far bigger. She wanted to develop a spell capable of wiping out thousands in one strike, so selecting talented people for research was crucial. Takuto believed it wouldn't be too difficult, and that got Molter fired up. As for the military numbers, the task was passed to Gia, but Takuto suggested they save it for later. So Atu explained that armies don't contribute to production, but Molter sided with Gia on this one, revealing that both he and Gia had bounties on their heads, which meant they needed more guards to protect Takuto. So to solve that, Takuto decided to summon a hero. Atu lit up, saying that although summoning a hero costs a lot of mana, they are powerful. In Minogra there are several heroes who serve the king. Each one is unique and powerful in their own way. They are still extremely useful, and Takuto could summon one immediately, though the others had no idea what to expect. Meanwhile, Takuto was gathering mana from his citizens. The happier they were, the more mana they would generate over time, so that will help in developing the nation. But back in the Holy Kingdom, the paladins finally received their orders. A young paladin named Louis was selected in his superior. A high-ranking paladin was someone he found difficult to deal with. He was rude and rough, but no one could deny his skill. Verdel, the high paladin, was complaining about the mission, but since Saint Soalina had received a revelation, they had no choice but to go to Dark Continent for investigation. And if the mission succeeded, they would secure the support of southern provinces, but their forces were lacking in numbers, so Louis had prepared mercenaries for work. Louis didn't like Verdel, but he knew cooperating with him increased their chances of success. Then back in Takuto's city, everything was steadily progressing just like in the game. Homes were being built atop trees, the flesh trees were growing well, the food storage was almost finished, and magical research was going smoothly. They even discovered a source of water, as Emil had done a fantastic job turning the settlement into a real town. Takuto was moved by the dedication of his people, and Emil broke into tears of joy that it took a lot to calm her down. Later, they went to inspect the town together. The flesh trees were now fully grown, and advanced tools Takuto had produced were accelerating their progress. At this rate, the town could develop faster than anyone imagined. With food now secured, they could focus on other things. Then Emil offered to show their water source, but the path got darker, and when they arrived, the water was visibly corrupted. Gia and Molter showed up too, and Emil reported that the water supply had gone bad. However, Atu reassured them it was safe to drink. The water had simply been corrupted as part of their growing domain. Even the air they breathed was now corrupted, yet somehow it felt refreshing. This cursed terrain benefits evil beings and harms those of neutral or good beings, and since the Dark Elves were now Takuto's citizens, they too had turned evil, making the land more comfortable for them to live in. This terrain will also serve as a strong defense against invaders, although it did look hideous, and if their domain kept expanding it would eventually draw attention. Atu, however, remained unfazed because Takuto had already made the decision to summon a hero. Gia was still unsure what that meant, so Atu gave a brief demonstration of a hero's power. Because she herself was a hero and the power she showed was just a small glimpse, heroes grow stronger over time, making them ideal for protection. So she was happy that she's enough to meet their current needs, but Takuto told her to clean up the mess she made during her flashy show. Gia was left stunned by the level of power on display. Then the elder mentioned that they were preparing to build a new castle for Takuto, but the king was content with what he had. Still, the Dark Elves wished for their king to live in a grand place worthy of his status, and if it makes them happy, Takuto agreed, though he made one strange request. He wanted a floating castle, like literally a castle in the sky. It sounded impossible, but considering the miracles Takuto had shown, maybe he could make it real, though all of that might have to wait, because those two paladins were already marching toward the Dark Continent. And right there episode 3 ends, but stay tuned to find out what more mysteries unravels in the Lord of Mysteries. Until then, take care. And once again, We're back with another thrilling episode of Apocalypse Bringer, so let's pick up right where we left off last time. The saint from the Holy Kingdom sensed something abnormal stirring deep within the Dark Continent. And because of this, she ordered 2 holy knights to head out and investigate, completely unaware of the storm that's quietly building up. Meanwhile, Takuto and Atu were hard at work turning their dream kingdom into a living reality. With the Dark Elves now accepted as their citizens, the kingdom began to take shape step by step. Food chains were established, houses were being built. And the very terrain itself had turned corrupted. Since they're evil beings, the corruption actually benefits them, while for anyone good or neutral, stepping into this corrupted land has harmful effects. And soon enough visitors were on their way. The 2 holy knights, Werder and Larones, along with a group of mercenaries were dispatched for an investigation of Dark Continent, but for now, the episode begins with things relatively calm. Food and shelter had been arranged, and that's when Takuto had gathered a huge pile of food at the altar and called everyone out. The Dark Elves had no idea why their king had summoned them so suddenly, but then right in front of them, Takuto cast a spell transforming the entire pile of food into a multi-legged bug. It was shocking to witness. Showing just how godlike Takuto's power truly is that he could create a life form, Atu told the people that this was just a glimpse of what their king could do, and the more loyal and happy his citizens are, the more powerful Takuto can become. This power lets him produce whatever he wishes, although even Takuto and Atu weren't fully sure how it worked, because they simply poured mana into food and that's it, which opens the door for summoning new hero units. Takuto had already decided to summon Isla, the queen of bugs. She was the most suitable hero for their needs right now. Because Isla commands every insect and can produce larvae to strengthen both their military and labor force, so she's useful in both war and construction. Atu was impressed by Takuto's logic. And not only was Isla reliable, but she was also the safest pick, since the other heroes had problematic personality. One wants world domination and another was obsessed with reckless adventures. All of them were powerful but unpredictable. Yet Takuto still hoped to meet them all eventually, though he wished none of them would ruin the peace he'd finally found. But as we know, that peace won't last long either way because the Holy Knights are already closing in. Werder was impressed at how quickly Larones had assembled the mercenaries, especially during this tense time when the north is also in chaos. Apparently, a barbarian attack had wiped out an entire village and a saint had been dispatched, but no progress had been made yet. Even the mercenaries had heard whispers about a witch being spotted there. And though they worked for coin, none of them dared take a step toward that area. Just like that, the group decided to rest for the night at an inn. There, Larones asked about the rumored witch. Bargo shared what he'd heard, but Werder shut it down, saying they should enjoy the moment, and oddly enough, Werder claimed it was written in the holy book that after completing a task, knights should relax and rejoice, which for him meant drinking and partying. Larones on the other hand felt their mission was sacred. Everyone has their own interpretation of duty. But still, Bargo questioned why holy knights were heading to the Dark Continent just to investigate. If there really was something like a witch there, he was ready to leave. So Werder replied that Dark Elves had fled into that region, and since they're considered neutral, they couldn't be trusted. If they were building power in secret, that would pose a serious threat. Besides, it was just a mission to gather information, not start a war. So if things went bad, they could always retreat. After all, everyone here had families waiting back home. Well, for now, Werder just wanted to enjoy a moment of peace before entering enemy territory. So the next day, they resumed their journey and soon encountered a hill giant. The mercenaries prepared to engage, but Werder ordered them to stand down. He wanted to handle it alone. Being a high-ranking holy knight means he was blessed with divine strength, and with that power he took down the giant effortlessly. Larones bowed in respect, but Werder doubted the gesture was genuine. Then back in the forest, Takuto was munching on a burger while Atu scolded him for not eating healthy food. Takuto said hospital food had ruined any craving for greens, and besides, Atu only eats salads anyway. Now Takuto decided to fill Molter and others about the region, because he noticed a city right next to the forest, and though it didn't belong to the good nations, it could be a neutral eastern territory, but being so close means they might discover the existence of their dark kingdom. And right then, Takuto sensed intruders approaching, so he told Atu to send them off as peacefully as she can, and if they refuse, SH knows what to do. The intruders were none other than Werder and Larones, and just as they were about to enter, a woman in a black cloak appeared. Claiming to be a dark elf from the forest, she asked for their reason for coming here. Werder refused to answer and instead asked why she was here. Everyone knew the dark elves had been exiled from their homeland. So she replied that her people had chosen this forest as their new home, and kindly asked them not to enter and disturb their peace. Werder paused after sensing something wasn't quite right, and stopped Laronis from speaking. He tried to convince the woman to let them enter calmly, but she stood her ground, repeating that her people simply wanted to live in peace so they shouldn't. Now neither side was willing to back off. Werder then revealed something he wasn't supposed to, that their saint had received a divine revelation that a calamity was hiding in these woods. Laronis grew anxious hearing this. And Narita, still in disguise, calmly said there was no such thing and insisted they turn back. Even if Werder refused to leave, Atu wasn't going to let them pass, so she politely requested again that they return, but Laronis sensed dark energy from her, which confirms that a calamity truly exists here. But in a shocking move, Werder decided to withdraw, catching everyone off guard. Laronis couldn't believe Werder was backing down, and despite being ranked lower than him, he decided to take command. He accused Werder of misusing his authority and declared that from now on he'd lead the mission. The mercenaries had been hired by Laronis, so they were bound to follow his orders. Werder tried to stop him from provoking a conflict, but it was too late. Atu found his arrogance unfortunate, and in a flash, she slaughtered all the mercenaries without hesitation. Only then did Laronis realize Werder had been right all along. And right there our episode 4 ends, so stay tuned to watch another episodes as well, and for that, subscribe the channel and don't forget to hit the bell icon or you'll miss the latest updates. Till next time guys, take care.